actually the natives of the land before the Europeans got there. At least the Australians are admitting that it's a racist society, that, that they know that if you're not European, you're probably not going to have all the privileges of being a European. So in 1975, they passed several subsequent bills since. But basically, you can be convicted. Let's say we had the same law in the United States. You could be convicted here. Let's say you were convicted for 20 years for having a half a pound of marijuana. Well, you can appeal it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to keep you in prison. But this commission in Australia, it's actually a nonpartisan, non-governmental body, except it actually has judicial and prosecutorial power. So you can submit as a citizen to this independent Australian agency your case, what happened to you, and how long you're being sentenced in there, how long you're going to be in prison. This commission alone has the power to reverse convictions, expunge records, and free you based on the fact that your rights were violated, probably because you're not European. I think something like that, not only, in the United States, something like that's needed. It's not just necessarily a race thing, but people are put through these court systems for having a joint or something in their pocket, and they go to prison for 5 years, basically, so they can get 5 free years of 20 cents an hour labor to make helmets and uniforms for the U.S. military-industrial complex. So when we go in on Thursday, there's 4 judges, and I won't say it on camera because they're going to probably watch it, but there's 4 judges that we're going to occupy their courtrooms. Courtrooms are public places, so there's nothing they can do. They're not going to like us being there, but that's good. We don't want them to like us being there. But we're going to show up in uniform, again, just wear your white t-shirt, right, repeal 11th Amendment on the front. But the 4 judges that we're going to occupy this Thursday, I've looked over some of their cases, looked over some of the things that they've done to people, and it's just completely inhumane. There's a 19-year-old kid last week who had a half a pound of marijuana, never had a criminal record, and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And there's nothing that he can appeal it all he wants. But the sad thing is he signed a plea agreement, which I'm going to get to in a second. Yeah. And these plea agreements basically negate our Sixth Amendment right to a public speedy trial by jury. Once you sign that plea agreement, you've waived all rights. There's nothing you can do. So even if his kid appeals, there's nothing he can do. He's going to be in prison for 20 years no matter what, unless, of course, we have that commission like Australia has, which we're fighting for. Those 4 judges we're going to get to on Thursday. The last thing I want to talk about, before we talk about our protocol in the courtroom, is a jury nullification. And I think what that basically means is, first of all, we got to convince people to never sign a plea agreement. If you sign a plea agreement, there's nothing you can do to appeal. You've waived all rights. Most of the time, prosecutors, the state, they do not want to take you to trial. It costs them far too much money to try cases. But they scare people into saying, look, you sign the plea agreement, you'll serve 2.5 years. If you don't, you lose a trial, you're going to get 10 years. So sign the plea, get it over with, and then the prosecutor gets kudos from the state, gets a pat on the back, maybe gets an appointment to an appellate court or as a judgeship because they adjudicate as many cases as possible without spending state's money by going to trial. So what we have to do is convince people never to sign a plea agreement. You can't do that. You're waiving all your rights. So you hold it out. You just wait it out. You're going to be scared. They're going to keep scaring you, telling you're going to serve 10 years in prison. But I've seen several cases at the last hour, one day before the trial's going to start, the state drops the charges. Why? Because they know they have no case, first of all, and they never wanted to take you to trial in the first place. It cost them too much money. But they wanted a free prisoner to have, again, 5-10 years. So once we do actually get to trial, once we convince everybody, never sign a plea agreement, the only power we have as citizens is jury nullification. Usually juries make up, there's usually 12 citizens that, come from wherever. I believe it's our natural born duty, especially, as the 99%, but especially Black and Latinos, I think it's our natural born duty if somebody's facing 20 years in prison, especially that kid last week, it's just a completely unjust sentence for something like that. It only takes one person on a jury to declare it a mistrial. Now the rest of the jury is going to be in there telling you, no, let's get this over with. I don't want to go through this. But it's our natural born, it's the only right we have as citizens in order to put the power of the courts back in our hands. We have to start convincing people, if you're on a jury and there's somebody facing 30 years in prison for a non-violent victimless crime, I believe it is our right. I think it's our duty, our natural born duty, to say not guilty in those cases. Because it only takes one person to declare a mistrial, and generally the state is not going to retry because they already spent $60,000, $70,000 on the first one. That's what we're trying to convince people, not only first of all, no plea agreements, and then jury nullification once we do get to the trial process. Lastly, basically just our demeanor in the courtroom when we go on Thursday. If you show up, we're going to show up here at 8 a.m. The court's open at 8:30. We're going to show up here, have your white t-shirt with Repeal 11th Amendment on it. Don't have a bunch of crap in your pockets because you got to empty your pockets. Don't wear a belt if you don't want to take it off and put it. You got to take your shoes off. You got to. So basically, have as little in your pockets as possible. Don't wear a belt if you don't want to take it off. Don't wear bulky shoes. You'll have to take those off. Don't wear like thick socks. You'll have to take those off. Basically just to get us in there as smoothly, as quickly as possible. I'd like to go in a straight line so we can get in as quickly as possible, sit down, and then proceedings generally start around 8:45, 9 o'clock. We got 4 judges, we're going to do them 2 hours each, sit in their courtrooms for 2 hours each on that day. It's perfectly legal for us to be in these public courtrooms, but again, they're not going to like it, but I like it, that they're not going to like it. The judge can potentially tell a bailiff that, we're violating something, hold us in contempt, tell us to get out of the courtroom. I'm not going to leave. But anybody that goes, you have the right to leave. Because we do have the right to be in our public courtrooms. That's why they call it a public, speedy trial by jury, because the public should be able to watch it. They're probably not going to like it, and they may actually, try to scare us into leaving. If you want to leave, that's your choice. I mean, you can do that, but I'm going to say this. When the judge says all rise, just rise. When they say be seated, be seated. We're not trying to, aggravate anybody or anything. Have your cell phones on vibrate, because you will get and these judges, especially in Maricopa County, will give you a criminal contempt charge if you do that. So keep your phone on vibrate. You can't take any cameras, you can't take any tape recorders into the courtrooms. And other than that, that's it. And we're going to stay there all day. And hopefully we, can see it in the judges and prosecutors' eyes that we're there, we're watching, and there's no longer just going to be carte blanche power for you people to basically throw people behind bars for 20 years to do slave labor in your, prison complexes that basically gave to your campaign to make you convict people for long sentences. Does anybody have anything to add? Questions?
When is this? When Thursday?
Yeah, we're going to show up here on Thursday morning at 8. The court opens at 8:30. I mean, the judges show up 8:45, 9 o'clock for their first cases. We'll be seated by then, and that'll be the extent of it. Anything else? Anybody have anything to add?